The webinar is now live.
Okay, well, now we get started. We're really excited. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today for our pop-up conversation on social distancing and the courts with Chief Circuit Court Judge Angela McCormick-Bisig in Louisville, Kentucky, and Mr. Bartosz Pilitowski, founder and CEO of Court Watch Poland in Warsaw, Poland. Welcome. My name is Xiaoyan Zhao. I am the Executive Director of the World Affairs Council of Kentucky and Southern Indiana. We are a hub for international exchange, dialogue, and learning located in Louisville, Kentucky. We are also a member of two national networks, the Global Ties US and the World Affairs Councils of America. And through these, we facilitate a variety of international professional and youth exchanges, many of those through the US Department of State. And we also provide speaker programs and educational opportunities for the Kentuckiana region throughout the year. Now, we are a member-supported organization, but we are not member exclusive in our programs. So that means that the public is welcome to attend all of our programs. Given that this period that we're in, we want to ensure that you all have this access to expert analysis and discussions on topics that impact all of us locally, nationally, and globally. And more than ever, I think we all are experiencing a global crisis despite being in our little corners of our own world. So today, we are very excited to have two respected leaders in the justice system of two very different cities and countries discussing how justice is carried out in the midst of this pandemic. Mr. Bartosz Pilitowski is the founder and CEO of Court Watch Poland, a nonprofit organization aiming at improving accessibility and fairness of the Polish justice system. Bartosz leads a team of dedicated researchers, lawyers, and animators. And with the help of hundreds of volunteers statewide, they provide legal education for the youth, support of independent observers to vulnerable parties, and state-of-the-art knowledge to judges and court administrators. Bartosz has authored and co-authored several reports and articles in academic journals, and he is also an alumnus of the US Department of State's International Visitor Leadership Program, which is one of the primary professional exchange programs that our council facilitates and through which we came to know Bartosz during his visit to Louisville last year. So a big welcome to Bartosz. And then we have our own Judge Angela Bisick, who has been a member of the Kentucky Judiciary for 18 years. Judge Bisick is currently serving as Chief Circuit Court Judge. Prior to this post, Judge Bisick was elected and served for 10 years as a Jefferson County District Judge. And before that, Judge Bisick worked as a prosecutor in the area of domestic violence and sexual assault for 7 years. Now, Judge Bisick is a community leader in Louisville with a very global outlook. Among her many involvements, she is a founding member of Restorative Justice Louisville and started the first ever language and cultural immersion program for the Jefferson County court system. We are also very proud to have had Judge Bisick to serve on our board of directors for many years in the past. Now, before I turn it over to our discussion today, I just want to do a really quick reminder about your functionalities and the run of show. This webinar is recorded and it is live streamed on Facebook. We will be providing a link to the recording after the program. We will plan to have about 20 minutes of conversation, which may include some of the questions that you submitted ahead of time. And then after our discussion, we will go into Q&A. Keep in mind that you can submit questions at any time during this discussion, and we will just collect them all and answer as many of them as we can during the Q&A. If you prefer, you can ask a question verbally. Just raise your hand and your controls in the bottom and we will unmute you. All right, we're going to get started. Before we get into some of the more discussions, let's learn a little bit more about each of your work. We have attendees from many locations, not just in the US, but also in Poland. Tell us a little bit more about what your work looks like. What does it involve? Did the quarantine affect any of the cases that you have been working on? Just give us an update of where you are and how the social distancing of the courts may have been affecting what you do. Let's start with Bartosz. Bartosz?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and a privilege to meet with you. Our work statewide consists of monitoring court cases. That's our most important activity as a court watch organization. As you might know, Court Watch organization in the States. We on the one hand, we monitor how the hearings are conducted, how parties are treated in the court, but we also raise awareness of the citizens how and why judicial power is so important to all of us. So we also conduct educational programs. We organize debates for youth, and we also meet with judges and try to share with the feedback that the citizens are trying to give to the judiciary via our organization. So our work consists of traveling and then meeting with people, and we had to cancel all of this, but still we are doing our job differently. We do research and we also monitor how our justice system in Poland is coping with this situation now. So even if it needs some special arrangements, today one of our volunteers was exceptionally let into the courtroom in Warsaw. So I'm very glad that he tried. Thank you, Michał, and I'm very thankful to the judge that let the hearing that let him in. So this is just what we are usually doing. Today we are concentrating more on research and providing feedback to our judiciary and to our executive power, how to cope with the situation better.
Great. Angela, what about you? How have you been able to, I guess, do your work while quarantining pretty much? I know that it looks like you are in your courtroom today, but that's, I don't know that our courts are open yet. Tell us a little bit more about that.
All right. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world watching this, and good morning to Shoyen and to Mr. Pilitowski, who I had the pleasure of going to Poland and observing firsthand the good work that his organization does. So one thing about all of us being in the middle of this pandemic is the awakening of the fact that we're so interconnected. You tend to think a place like Poland, where Bartosz observes the courts, or a place like the United States, where I've been a judge for 18 years, are very different. But certainly this virus, as it affects all of us and the way all of us conduct business, certainly is a reminder of the important work that your organization, Shoyen, does. In helping us all learn best practices from each other and help us all, exchange information and understand, whether you're in a court watch organization in Poland or whether you're a judge here in the United States, that this virus is impacting us all in the way we do business. Here in the United States, I'm what we call a state court judge. So I hear cases involving the citizens of my state, both civil and criminal. So felony criminal cases, we do have the death penalty here in the United States. So anything that carries as a punishment up 1 year to jail up and through the death penalty, I see those kinds of cases. And then civil cases where the amount in controversy is $5,000 or more. And immediately upon kind of a worldwide shutdown because of this virus, we got with our Supreme Court of the state and started looking at how we could keep the wheels of justice turning despite this pandemic. Because for people to feel peaceful and safe, you want to know that our laws are still being enforced, that there are still courts open to resolve disputes. But we're so huge on openness and transparency here in the United States, and our courtrooms being open and people having a constitutional right to confront, you know, their accuser, a constitutional right to be present and examine witnesses, that this whole concept of everyone staying home and not bringing people into our courtroom and not having lawyers here right in front of me. You're right, Shoyin, I'm sitting here in my courtroom today, and on any given day of the week, my courtroom would be full of people and would maybe even have a member of the media with the camera set up. You know, if I could turn my laptop around, you would see a courtroom and a jury box. And it's very different for my colleagues and myself to be in courtrooms by ourselves. But we pretty quickly pivoted, and we talk just as we are with your listeners today on a computer with individuals that are in rooms over in the jails. So I might have a criminal defendant on a screen with the lawyers, similar to the format where we are now. The civil practitioners, the same thing. They engage in oral argument. I might have somebody raise their right hand and swear to tell the truth as a witness. And it's all pretty much happening remotely. There are a lot of challenges, as you can imagine, with that. Constitutional rules that are challenged. You know, just me judging the credibility of a witness when I'm doing it on a computer screen versus in real life. We now have a rule where everybody's wearing masks. So if I'm a judge, you know, and I'm telling you what you have to do, but you can't see my expression, you can't hear what I'm saying, that adds a level of difficulty. So, and then, you know, as judges, we all have varying levels. When I went through undergraduate and law school, computers weren't a thing yet. I hate to say I'm that old, but, you know, we didn't operate. So I may not be as tech savvy as some of my younger colleagues on the bench. So there's been a whole lot of challenges. We've even had judges having to enforce orders where people were testing positive for COVID and not self-quarantining. So putting the community at risk. And you have to think of all the judicial considerations for a situation like that. Do they have the right to have a lawyer? Do they have the right to have a hearing? You know, what mechanism do you use to try to ensure compliance? You don't obviously want to put those people in jail. There's just a lot of different, you know, people who serve process to people. Can they go and do that amid a pandemic? There's just so many legal considerations that have arisen. But I am glad to say, you know, we're doing what we can, and we still have a justice system working. Starting June 1, we're going to open up even a little more with all of the, you know, Centers for Disease Control recommendations about masks and disinfectants. But it's been a challenge. But I think, Shoyin, you know, I told you privately, to me, it really highlights how important it is as a world that we stay in good communication. So I really respect you and all of your staff at the World Affairs Council of Kentucky and Southern Indiana for helping us all stay in contact with each other.
Thank you, Angela. That's really, you're so right. I think all of us had to have a very quick and steep learning curve with the technology use. But certainly for the justice system, there's a lot of constitutional issues that you just mentioned. You know, do we have laws that will allow you to do these things in a digital way and then still hold? So I imagine after this, there's probably going to be a lot of people looking into that. Is there that kind of preparation right now? You know, do you have like a working groups kind of looking into what might happen in the future, or how is this going to be incorporated into the justice system even now? It may not be a temporary thing, or it may be temporary now, but we're going to face these kinds of issues again, possibly in the future. Are we going to be better prepared?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have both statewide work groups that are being chaired by various members of our Kentucky Supreme Court. And then we also have local work groups. You know, Jefferson County and the city of Louisville have about 1 million people. So we have a local work group and a statewide work group that are looking at all of the issues as we implement procedures to, you know, to keep court going. Whether or not what kinds of individuals we have to have in front of us, what kind of things can we do remotely? And then looking at, time and cost for traveling, whether there are some kind of proceedings that we're going to keep kind of virtual or more in this format once we go back to business as usual. For me personally as a judge, the things that we decide, whether it's in a criminal case and whether somebody's going to lose their liberty, be incarcerated and, in jail or in prison, or the civil things, it's really, I'm always aware some of the most important things people go through. And certainly in our family courts, when you're talking about going through a divorce or your child custody issues, they're really some of the things that are some of the most important that you go through in your life. It's hard to think about engaging in those things when you aren't present, to have a child custody decision made or to have an important decision about the rights of your business made when you weren't there real time, passing the documents and information, letting the judge see it. I honestly hope that this doesn't result in, us having computer justice. I hope our courtrooms stay alive and vibrant. I hope we're able to travel and appear. I personally don't want to see it go to a virtual world. But, there's a reason I always say that the scales of justice are the hallmark of a judicial system, because we're always having to engage in this act of balancing. And right now, community safety obviously is such a priority. We don't want people getting sick. We don't want the vulnerable among us getting sick. So I'm balancing wanting to keep my community safe with wanting to have people be able to come to court for important proceedings. And every step along the way, as you work through that, you have to really be aware and compassionate of how hard it would be to have something important in your life decided remotely, but then the difficulty or the stress. And, I'm in a tall building, so you have to come through on a main floor and come up 9 floors to get to me. Just the act of getting in an elevator with people right now, is something that can give people a lot of stress. Coming into a busy courthouse. So we're balancing all of that. And I really have been impressed with how thoughtful and, like I said, compassionate to both of those sides I feel like the people in the justice system have been. But it's been stressful, I will say. And Bartosz can tell you too, I'm sure there in Poland, there really isn't a lot of, in a legal system, we look at precedent, we look at how things were done before. This is pretty much, other than the United States, the Spanish flu back in the 1914, there's not a lot of legal precedent. There's not a lot for me to look at as I make these decisions. So that part has been difficult as well. Bartosz, I don't know, I would throw it over to you. Are you aware, are they handling most things remotely in the Polish courts, or are they having social distancing and people wearing masks, but still attending court? What are your court reporters telling you about how they're engaging in their court business in Poland?
This situation is really something that connects us all, and it's very similar to what the problems that we are facing here, and the things that we are afraid of simply makes us similar. Though the judicial systems in our countries are different, and they react differently because of those differences. And the structure here is kind of two-tier, and we have administration, which is under the Ministry of Justice. It is centralized. So it was the Ministry of Justice and the legislature that reacted very promptly to the situation, and in the result of issuing a law on pandemic, the courts were closed for most of the issues and for most of the cases. So the reaction was very strict and was very cautious, and also, I think which is unusual, it might be unusual, is that the Polish system is very rigid if it goes about the time schedules. So each party, even the court, have certain amount of time for react on certain decisions. Those times were all suspended. suspended. So many cases, even procedures regarding execution, for example, execution of verdicts was suspended. So courts stopped for like about 2 months now, and only very urgent cases were resolved and heard. So these involve cases where pretrial detention is used, where there is some mental health issues or child custody issues. But these were the only cases that were actually handled, and no public hearing were done. We estimate that about 1 million of hearings were not actually taken place since the situation started. The reaction is also to provide safety measures for the court staff as soon as we unfreeze the system. And it's the time now is the time when we are all preparing for that. So the courtrooms, for example, are starting to be equipped with special shields. Let me show you an example, a picture of a courtroom in Poland, where the shields are already installed. You can see here in the middle desk for the judge or judges, because some of the cases are heard by a panel. It can be a panel of professional judges, of career judges, or a mixed panel, a professional judge and 2 lay judges. Like in the divorce cases, for example, are heard by a mixed panel. On the left, you have the plaintiff or prosecution, and on the right, you see the place for a defendant. All of these, seats are equipped with a plastic glass that stand up to protect the participants, and the shield like that is also installed on the judge's desk. So our courts are preparing for reopening. What we are worried about is that both the Ministry of Justice and the judicial associations are limiting the access of public. And this is something that worries us very much, because our constitution and also human rights law, they imply public hearing and the public giving the verdict in public. So when the public cannot attend the hearing, cannot enter the court, even the court building, it's impossible to make it public. And as maybe you have noticed, that this courtroom was equipped with computer monitors, but there were no cameras and no video transmission systems are installed. So there is no chance that the public can learn about how the hearing was conducted and what the verdict was and what was the reasoning for the verdict, even by transmitting it online, as it is done in many jurisdictions. So these are the challenges that we are facing now, that the system reopens, but still it does not reopen fully. And this is something that we as an NGO fighting for fairness and transparency in the judicial system, we have to tackle with.
A question about during this time in terms of cases, do you, in terms of selecting, is there a process? Are you prioritizing certain cases over others? How are you able to schedule? How do you see a particular increase or a decrease in certain types of cases now compared to maybe other normal times? Particularly, there's been a lot of concern over domestic violence cases. are you hearing about those cases, people reporting that? So any thoughts or anything you can share with us? Angela, you want to start?
Okay. The question is about what kind of cases we're hearing and how we're prioritizing, and then important areas like domestic violence. I do just want to back up and address quickly, Bartosz talked about his organization being concerned about public access to court. And Bartosz, here in the US, we are also limiting those that can appear in our courtrooms to the actual litigant and the lawyer. Whereas normally if you had a family member or somebody else in a company, you know, anyone is welcome to come in. And I agree with you, it's a concern. One of the things we're looking into to address that, and again, I know it's different for you because your courtrooms aren't equipped with cameras, but we're talking about leaving an open party phone line to the courtroom while we go through court, so that even if you can't walk into a courtroom, you could dial into a number and then have an open line where you could hear what's going on in court. We also, our Supreme Court, when they have oral argument in cases, because those cases set the law for all of us and they're important, they live stream those on a YouTube channel. So you could go on a Kentucky Supreme Court YouTube channel, and we're looking into maybe live streaming our courts as well. So although people wouldn't be able to come in actually, they would still be able to see what's going on virtually. And something as simple as having an open phone line with it muted from the side of the bench where people could listen is just one way we're trying to address that, just as you're working through the safety issue of having a number of people in court. Back to what kind of cases that we're currently hearing, Shoyen. Just like in Poland, when the whole virus first hit, I would say for the first couple of weeks, almost went on a lockdown. We thought it would be a short period of time. So most of our civil case work, we thought we would just delay and pass a couple of weeks. And then we were really working to try to address criminal cases where the defendant's in custody. Because obviously if your liberty rights are being taken away, you don't want to just pass your case 6 months to have it dealt with. Now that this situation has continued and gone on, I think much longer than anyone anticipated, just as you ask, we're having to look at what cases we hear. So I would say we are giving a priority to cases with in custody defendants. So defendants whose liberty interests are at stake. They're either being held in jail on a bond. We got together as a judicial system and released a lot of people to home incarceration, to being monitored by GPS at home. We tried to let out as many people as we believed as a community we could safely, but we still have obviously people in our jails and prisons. So those cases are taking a priority with our time. We are opening back up remotely to have civil cases, and I've been doing that in the last couple of weeks, and those are being done by Zoom and Skype. And really it's lawyers reaching out and contacting us saying they have a dispute or an issue that needs to be resolved for them to continue with their case. I know I'm hearing a lot of, issues and problems with civil cases, just, the lawyers trying to decide whether to move forward, whether to try to wait. With respect to domestic violence, it's really important that people know that the judges in family court who hear cases for emergency orders of protection that are given by the courts to women who may be victims of domestic violence, those are still happening. You can call the staff to get a hearing scheduled. Police in our community are still responding to domestic violence calls. We have an intake center at our courthouse where a woman can come and file for an order of protection and file a complaint if she's being, hit or in any way threatened physically in her home. So all of those services are up and running, and they have been throughout the virus. So there's been no shutdown of those. They may look a little different. You may have to have a virtual hearing. You may have to be patient and coming down because they're keeping people socially distant, even as you wait to go in and talk with the people in that office. But those kinds of cases are being held and will continue to be held, regardless of the other circumstances in court.
Bartosz, do you see similar type of, is domestic violence cases, are those, are those numbers fairly high, or is there any way to kind of see where they are during this time in Poland?
These cases would not enter the court directly and so quickly, because nowadays laws in Poland allow also the police and prosecution to actually make those emergency orders by themselves, so they don't have to ask court for permission. Also one of those exceptions, one of those urgent cases, that will be heard by the court anyway, are those regarding domestic violence. I don't know the statistics, but there is a worldwide awareness that there's the situation, people being locked down in their homes, might have a connection with rise of number of domestic violence cases, and so we will monitor that in the future. This is one of the things that we are planning to make a study, a research on court files, to looking back in how these cases were resolved, and also how what measures were taken to help the victims and to prevent the violence in the future. And the types of cases which are considered urgent and being heard even now, this list is decided by legislature. So this is in the power of legislature to decide which cases should be heard, and there is a possibility for a chief justice or the chief judge in a certain court to decide that a given case should be treated as urgent, regardless of what kind of case is that. So I know cases where not only the parties ask the chief judge to make this case urgent because of some reasons, but also the judges themselves were looking into the cases and looking for cases which should be treated as urgent, and they asked their presidents of court to give the order to preside as urgent, because if they don't do it, I mean, if the president would not issue that order, the case would have to be suspended anyway. So this is all this bureaucracy that would have to be done. But anyways, judges have ways to proceed with cases which they find urgent, regardless whether they are on this list or not.
So I think we are about 30 minutes out. We're going to try to get some questions. At this time, if anyone has a question, please feel free to go ahead and type it in the Q&A box, and then we will take it. And while you're doing that, I've got some pre-submitted questions. Some of them you may have already answered. One was about jury trials in civil cases. How does social distancing affect jury trials in civil cases? I think that's Angela.
We have been, that has been one of the hugest differences in how our system looks right now. We normally bring in this jurisdiction 200 to 300 people for a jury orientation. And then my colleagues and I, as we need jurors to hear cases, pull from that panel of 200 to 300 people, maybe 45 to 50 people, and bring them up to our courtroom, where the attorneys engage in a process we call voir dire, which are actually two French words, where they ask the panel questions, and then from that we cull out 12 to 14 who sit as our jury on the case. There is really no way we've been able to establish thus far to bring that number of people in and safely engage in the process that we do to have jury trials. We also have a concept it's a gatekeeper for criminal charges called a grand jury. here in the US. A grand jury hears the basic evidence against someone and makes a decision about whether or not a charge may proceed. Same thing, we bring in a huge pool of citizens to have that grand jury. So we've been unable to have the grand jury meet and consider new cases basically all of April and May. So our first goal starting June 1 is to bring in citizens to do a grand jury, and we're looking at remotely doing the initial questioning so that we can just bring in a panel. And then we're going to use the courtroom here in the courthouse that normally serves for our appellate arguments to allow them to socially distance 6 to 8 feet from each other as they hear the information. The judge is going to go and hear the presentation from the grand jury on what cases they decide to have charges. So the first type of jury that we're going to have will be starting in June, and that will be a grand jury. Probably in August, we're going to be looking at bringing juries back. And instead of having a big panel brought in, each courtroom will bring in a smaller amount. We're going to look for large spaces in our community where we can engage in that voir dire and keep the jurors apart. And then again, as Bartosz expressed the concern there in Poland, we'll be limiting the number of people that can come in our courtrooms because of the necessity of spreading our jurors out throughout the courtroom. They'll be wearing masks. We'll be sanitizing the areas that they come into, but we're going to need to spread them out 6 to 8 feet away from each other. So it's really challenging, this important concept of a right to a trial by a jury of your peers, to effectuate that in a time where we can't gather in large groups. And it's the one thing, even with Zoom and Skype, we have really been unable as of yet to recreate. We are eager to find ways. Like I said, we're looking at larger areas in our community where we can space out that original panel of 45 or 50 to engage in that question and answer that we call voir dire, in order to find out if people have things in their background where they wouldn't be well suited for a particular kind of case. We're eager to get jury trials up and running again. We're looking at probably August before that's going to happen. We are resolving cases by taking pleas and doing other things, but for right now, and really since the beginning of March, we haven't had much by the way of jury trials.
Well, having been part of that pool a couple of times in Kentucky, it is, I can imagine it must be a big challenge, because it's packed with people at any one time, and you stay there for the entire day, people coming in and out. So it's probably going to take some time before everybody's going to feel pretty comfortable and have the facilities needed for that. There's a question similar to that for Poland. The question is, do you think that the restrictions on public meetings has impacted the courts in Poland in the same way as they do not use jury trials in criminal cases? Are you able to conduct trials in Poland with the use of technology in order to avoid parties appearing in person?
As Angela mentioned, this is the main difference between our systems. We don't have jury trials. We have panels of judges hearing more serious cases, and in most severe cases of most severe criminal cases, this is a panel of maximum 5 people, 2 professional judges and 3 lay judges. So one of the ideas to resolve the backlog that has been created by this situation is to allow those cases to be heard by a single judge. Also in civil cases where there is a need of a panel of 3 judges, like in those divorce cases, for example, I've mentioned before, also those may be heard by a single judge. And nevertheless, as you have seen, the courtrooms in Poland are usually much smaller than those in the States, though we also use larger courtrooms for example, large criminal cases that we need large courtrooms. Most of them are smaller, and this lack of space also caused problem how to fit sometimes all the defendants and the witnesses and the public interested. And now in this time of social distancing, it will be even harder. So what we are expecting is that the technology will be introduced on a wider scale, just to allow cases to be resolved because of those logistics issues. Nowadays, there is such a possibility to hear witnesses online, but the only possibility was to hear them if they are in other court. So one court was using other court help to hear a witness that lives far away. So it was a conference, but between courts. So the security and so that the identity check was done in the different court. What we really need is to introduce also the possibility to communicate with people that are not in the courtrooms, but maybe in the to communicate, make those conference calls, for example, starting with professional lawyers. So, for example, the law firms could be responsible for checking the identity or guaranteeing the identity of a person speaking to the judge, because these are the concerns that are very common to our system, which is very legalistic and everything needs to be very formally fine. So introducing technology in such a rigid system, bureaucratic system, is much harder, and we experience it now, where other jurisdictions in Europe have introduced some teleconferencing before, so they have this experience and also the technology and the knowledge skills in the among the legal professionals, among the employees of the court, to actually handle those things. Those teleconferencing teleconferencing was very rare. So we used that, but on a very small scale now, and we look forward for using that on a wider scale, and also we look forward for making those hearings, making the verdicts more public, thanks to the technology. So things that Angela was mentioning, that takes place in Kentucky, for example, that the hearings or the verdicts are transmitted in YouTube. It's something that we are still waiting for. So I hope this will be inspiring for our executive legislative power, but also for judges to be open for using this technology to make those constitutional guarantees real, because without letting people into the court, we cannot provide this public hearing. So we need to take new bold steps, also with using the technology to make justice happen, and make it happen promptly.
Thank you. We're going to take one more question, and then I'll just have you maybe give some closing thoughts. This one seems to be a little bit more local. The question is, how are filing for protective orders working under the current conditions for COVID-19 in counties where e-filing is not set up yet? Are there steps being taken to provide e-filing opportunities for protective orders in all counties? Are emergency protective order and custody hearings being heard in person? If not, are steps being taken to ensure that both parties are given sufficient information regarding setting up their teleconferencing? And how is this working for populations of limited English proficiency? I think that's more for probably for Angela, but certainly Bartosz, if you have anything to add.
Yes, starting on limited English proficiency, I just wanted everyone to notice that Bartosz's English is so much better than my Polish. So we should all at least be thankful. I meant to say dzień dobry when I started, which is good morning in Polish as well. But that's about the extent. Bartosz can tell you I was frustrated when I went there to visit with the important Court Watch program and the important Court Watch work that they do, that his organization, Court Watch Poland, does in Poland, that I was really frustrated after being there 2 weeks. I didn't speak fluent Polish. So I just want everyone to recognize that he's participating in this webinar in his second language, and how impressive that is. And the fact that I am able to say good morning only, I wish I could say more to those watching that are Polish. The question is about how litigants can have access to the court system, particularly for domestic violence order petitions, which are orders of protection that a woman can come and get from the court. I'm on a statewide committee during good times where we are trying to implement e-filing. In our federal court system in the United States, we do have e-filing. We have e-filing up and running in our state court systems as well. I currently enter most all of the orders that I enter in court electronically. We still have, kind of as a seatbelt, our paper copy files as well, but I currently enter all my orders electronically, and we're working to have all of our court system, our files and our filings to be done electronically. We're not there yet. As I said, there are a couple of ways you start that process to have an emergency protective order. You can come down 24 hours a day to the building and you'd be let in to go to our domestic violence intake center, where our clerk takes people back one at a time to file a petition. Those could also be filed via an attorney electronically into the court record on your case. And we do have e-filing open. Like I said, we're kind of running a dual system right now in my jurisdiction, where you have the capability of filing things electronically or in paper, and we still make paper copies of everything because our files are still done in paper. They're not electronic, although certain portions of them are. But just to reemphasize, all of the ways that you would normally traditionally access the courts for the filing of an emergency protective order or a domestic violence order are still available. Our clerk's office is open for business. Again, it all looks a little bit different than it did pre-COVID-19, but it's open for business. So there's half staffing. So any given day here in the courthouse, half of the employees who are normally here are working remotely from home and half are here. But the clerk's offices are still open for filings. And like I said, our domestic violence intake center is still open. So there's public access to those functions even during this important time. If we don't get anything else out today, if that word gets out through the World Affairs listenership that service is available, I think Bartosz made an excellent point. Domestic violence happens whether there's a worldwide pandemic or not, but certainly the added stress, of the unknown, of the stress of the virus, of the stress to all of our health and our family members' health, and then just having us all be at home at a time where there's high stress and anxiety. I think most scholars in this area believe that it's a situation ripe for problems for women and problems for people who have, for whatever number of reasons, difficulty resolving things peacefully in their home. So it is important for women to know they're not alone, that there is help in the system, that they can still get help in all of the ways they did before the virus. Again, it all may look slightly different, or you might have to have a little more patience because there's less clerks available, but it's all still open and available.
Yeah, that's thank you, Angela. I think that's a very important message. I think just because we are kind of told to be to stay home, that the perception of that everything is closed can keep people away from actually going into the courts and doing and thinking that everything is open. So that's a really important piece that we need to know. We do have one person with a hand raised. I'm going to try to unmute her, Allison. Let's see if we can do this. Maybe. Oh, Okay, Allison is on. Allison, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Hi. That was thank you, Judge, for answering. Those questions were actually mine. I'm a victims advocate at Kentucky Refugee Ministry, serving those of limited English proficiency who've been a victim of a crime in the United States. I have a lot of domestic violence cases, so that's really good information to know. I was also curious, so I know I was talking about the domestic violence intake center through criminal court, but I wanted to make sure that the family court clerk was open as well in case there is a violation of a protective order. Could you answer that for me, please?
Yes. Thanks for the work you do. That's a great program. I'm familiar with it, and it is important work. You know, we work hard to have interpreters available and to have access. One of the ideals of America is that, you know, we're all treated equal regardless of where we come from or what language we speak. So I certainly respect the role you're playing in making sure our citizens get justice. The family clerk's office is open. I have to walk through it a lot. There are folks down there and it's manned. And again, you know, you're going to be spaced out as you wait on the floor, but the clerks are back there. And again, you're on a half staff. So there's not, you know, the availability there normally is, but the family court clerk's office is open. And what I'm told by my family court colleagues is that the best way to get access to a judge there, if you need to have an emergency hearing, would be to contact the administrative assistant or the secretary in that division and say an issue or a violation of a protective order, and you know you need to get back in front of the judge, and they'll work with you to schedule a virtual hearing. In dependency, abuse, child removal hearings, they're trying to have as many of those in person as they can. They're also where citizens are able to get in front of a computer screen or get on a cell phone. They're having those hearings remotely as well, but they're having those important dockets. The family court judges have been working hard to ensure that they can still continue to have those important dockets.
Great. Thank you so much, Judge.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson.
All right. Well, it looks like we do not have any other questions, and I think through your discussions, you've answered a lot of the other questions that we had earlier. It's a very difficult time. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things coming out of this pandemic, maybe new sets of ways of doing things, as well as carrying out justice in our systems. Before we end, I just want to thank both Bartosz and Judge Bisick for your time today and really sharing your knowledge and your research with us. Before we end, do you have any other closing thoughts, anything you'd like to just share with us in terms of maybe your outlook for where this goes after this? Bartosz?
I'll let you go first.
First of all, it was a pleasure to talk to you and have this discussion. Thank you, Alison, for your question also. As you might know, Court Watch organizations are very often focused on domestic violence cases. So I can also ensure all of our listeners from Poland that in any case, if there is a need of our presence in the courtroom, our observers, our volunteers are there to help you, and we'll do our best to get into the courtroom, regardless of those orders, not by some kind of violence, of course, but violating those orders, but simply by writing to the court and asking and explaining the situation, also reminding about this right for a public hearing and the right of a victim, for example, to have someone with self and not to be alone in the courtroom, because it is stressful to be in the situation, and it is much more stressful to be in the courtroom in such a situation. So you can count on us. I'm really amazed by the work and attitude that Judge Bisick presents here. This transparency, openness, and also being open-minded to find solutions to the situation, to be flexible also to serve people. which is something that I really admire, and I'm sure that all other listeners from Poland really admire. And you, I think it's a great inspiration for all of us here to listen to you, and also to learn how you react to the problems by looking for how the citizens' rights have to be protected in this situation. So this being citizen focused is really something that that is really admirable, and I'm so privileged to know you, and to have this opportunity to speak to you, and also so we can share with this conversation, and share your experience with all our listeners in Poland. So thank you very much. Thank you, Xerin, for organizing this. Also, thank you to Laura. I know that she's in the background, but also helping you with organizing all of this. You're doing a great job, and I'm really grateful that I could meet you, and now we can keep in touch and share our experience and learn from each other in this situation, which is which we are all in this together. So it's really great to know that we can also help each other by sharing and by encouraging each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela?
Yeah, I'll close today by thanking anyone who took the time to attend one more web presentation. We're all in this format for meetings and things a lot. I'm impressed with anyone who stuck it out with us to hear all of this presentation. I want to thank the World Affairs Council of Kentucky and Southern Indiana for continuing to press on even with these difficult circumstances and try to bring the world together. I really think, having us all get together and understand each other. As I said, I was able to travel to Poland and see the important work that Court Watch Poland does there. And they really have the right idea. The judges I met there were intelligent and hardworking, but it's a different mindset when you're thinking of throwing open the doors to your courtroom, either to a YouTube channel or a telephone channel or to members of Court Watch Poland. That's a different mindset. But I think one thing that a judicial branch of government does for a society is it brings confidence that things are fair, that people are held accountable when they do wrong, and that disputes can be resolved fairly. And for all of us, Poland, US, the more I think the public has its eyes and ears in the door, and I think judges will find the more, even though it's a little hard to think about, the more they allow that, the more citizens can see that thoughtful solutions are being achieved, and that there's always going to be criticism when you open the door, but when people can see the thought and the work that goes into your work on a case, I think it makes a huge difference. And it's so inspiring for me to see Court Watch Poland, in a young democracy in Poland, that they get that and they go in and they're trying to help their judges be better by giving them feedback, from average citizens. We sit up on these benches in our black robes, and it's a little bit isolating. And so what they do is they give the judges information about how the citizens perceive their work. And it's really important. So I commend Bartosz and Court Watch Poland for the work they do, and the World Affairs for the work you do. And, I always think we all work hard in our individual silo, and together we make better communities. And when we make better communities, then we make a better world, which is what we're all here for. So thank you for this opportunity today.
Thank you, Angela. We're very lucky to be able to do this work at the World Affairs Council through these exchanges. And Laura Duncan, who is kind of behind the scenes and put this together, facilitate a lot of these visitor exchange programs, allows us to really have that opportunity to meet people like Bartosz all the way in Poland, and many others like him around the world, to be able to connect them with our own leaders like Angela here, and be able to have that kind of exchange of ideas and cultural understanding. I think that's how we get through a lot of these common issues, just being able to share the experiences, the great experience that both of you have. So thank you so much for joining us. Before we go, I do want to put in a
Is it
very
Jinkuye? Jinkuye?
You're perfect. Really. That's English, French, and now you
and
speak
Polish.
Yes.
Multilingual. We will be having one more virtual speaker program later this week. So I just want to make a really quick plug for that. It is on Thursday, 21st. It's at the same time at noon. And it's a program of what we call Choosing Freedom in the Time of COVID-19, Democratic versus Authoritarian Approaches to the Pandemic. It is a program that we are doing in partnership with the George W. Bush Institute and features two of their fellows, researchers and experts. So we have that on our website, worldkentucky.org, and we'll be sending that after this program, so that if you are interested, we do hope you will sign up to join us for another webinar. Again, thank you everybody, and Bartosz and Angela, be safe, be healthy. We look forward to hopefully connecting again soon, and everybody else do the same. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we off?
We're off.
Okay.